Aloha and welcome back to another episode of the Ohana Packers Edition podcast. Once again, I am going to try and remember how to do this podcast since it's been a while and Joe has been taking the torch and running with it this off season. But Joe, you and I are back. It's 4th of July weekend. Happy 4th to everyone who celebrates or recognizes or whatever word we want to put with that at the current political political temperature that we're at, and I'm gonna leave everything at that because we won't dive into that hellhole as much. But Joe, the Packers have slowly trickled on with this offseason, and as we crawl our way to training camp. But how are you doing, buddy?
Hanging in there. Like I told Mike, I figured this would be the perfect time to do a kind of an off-season recap type deal since there hasn't really been any kind of news, and with it being the holiday weekend, trying to get a guest on was kind of near impossible. So I figured this would be the perfect time to do a kind of a recap on things, uh, discuss some transactions, discuss the schedule and things like that. So it basically bring it back to Packers. I know for the last few weeks it's been anything but Packers. I've had some really good guests and really good conversations going on. So, but I know what people are mainly here for, and that's our Packer takes.
Yep. So, as Joe just mentioned, this is going to be a slight recap of the bigger stuff that's gone on since our last, deep dive, which was recapping the draft class. And as of then, I believe all the Packers draft picks are signed, which at this day and age is basically a formality more than anything else because they've really doubled down on the rookie wage scale. But I don't believe there are any
It
sort of drama for the Packers in that regard. But
is Belton finally signed,
hold on.
because I know he was the last one, but I really haven't paid
Yeah.
attention to see if no, he's still unsigned
Oh, there it
per the
is.
Packer website.
Yeah, hold on. Oh, you know what?
Yeah, according to the website, the Packers roster, he's still an unsigned
Yeah.
draft pick.
And as of I know it's been a few weeks, but as of June 19th, only the first two of the second round picks were signed. And so it's okay. I know I just said that rookie draft picks are kind of a formality at this point, but there are there is a slight dance that the teams do with picks of a certain round. They do the teams or the picks, depending on which goes first. They do like to see what accommodations the other franchises make for their picks of the same round. They kind of let the table set itself, and there's not much percentage that these contracts can be scaled up or down, but there is legitimate verbiage that's put in. I know one of the big ones from a few, like almost 10 years ago, was when Joey Bosa had the that like one clause in his contract that he held out over, and I know other guys have done similar. I can't say for certain what Belton's waiting on, but it does sound like 32 out or 30 out of the 32 second round picks are waiting. And so it's like how much of their deals are guaranteed, blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. So it's it's a matter of if, or it's a matter of when, not if. I do just think that it matters that, like I said, no one really wants to make that first step in the dance. They want to wait to see what everyone else kind of does there.
Well, if I remember right, and like I kind of said on Blue Sky the other day, I tweeted or retweeted something or quote tweeted or whatever you want to call it at Maggie Loney, because she said the same thing. She's going through, the newborn stages. They just had their second kid, and she said she hadn't really been paying attention to football because of distractions. And I said, well, with my off-season, off-topic stuff, I really haven't paid attention to much either. So I could be completely wrong on this, but isn't Shamar Stewart the only holdout for first round still?
Yeah,
And
and
it's
that's like a
something
totally
about,
different. Yeah,
I can't remember what the clause is that they're trying to stick in there, but
I think his
he
was the
does.
offset
Oh,
one because that was similar to what.
it's it's so it's something that
Oh, his was
that
the
they can
injury
cancel
waiver
the
one. Yeah.
contract. Yeah, yeah. If something happens, they can get out of his contract easier than yeah. So I don't know. I mean, when you get to this point in time, you get a little bit worried about it because it's like, well, you're missing some key moments here. I know you're in the building, but usually they don't let you do any kind of practice if you're not signed to a contract. You can still be there, you can still do some things, but they pretty much say hands off because you have no contract protections and we have no protection against liabilities under there. So it's kind of it, not that anything's going to happen. I think what's the worst that can happen? They sit out this year and re-enter the draft next year.
I don't think
Isn't
they
that
can
how
even
it
do that.
works?
I
That's
don't,
how it used to be. Was
yeah,
that you had to sit out a full year and then you could re-enter the draft the next year?
right. And you see, I feel like the CBA rules are so different. I don't even, and it hasn't happened. It flat out hasn't happened in like, I feel like since before our parents were born. But I do think that that's probably laying in the weeds somewhere as well. But from what I'm gathering on some quick reads is that one of the big dominoes is Tyler Shook, the quarterback. I think the Saints took. He's trying to get more guaranteed on his contract, and
It's because he's like 50 years old.
yeah, got to lock in that generational wealth. But and same thing, and then T.J. Sanders is another one who's taken in the vicinity of where Belton went. That people are saying is like, oh, that's sort of a domino. So, like I said, it gets into this area where like you and obviously we've seen every other pick in every other round for the Packers get signed, but it's kind of like no one wants to be the first to sign their second round pick other than the guys who went first and second in that round. But I, I don't have any reason to be concerned about what happened because, excuse me, we're not hearing anything that there's hold up on either side. There's none of this news is directly about Belton other than he's just one of a statistic kind of thing and stuff. So, but like you said, there is a drawback. Because minicamp isn't open, I don't know how much they're like practicing. And I think you're right that he can attend meetings and he can work out at the facility. I don't know if the team trainers, I forget how much that contact is allowed with or without a contract, but I
It's
do.
as far as I remember, it's very limited. I mean,
Yeah,
they can have conversations, they can do that stuff, but until they're under contract, they cannot like
you
be
cannot hit the
fully.
practice
I mean,
field.
they can
Yeah,
obviously. Right, right. And they might not even be able to work out because of the whole liability thing. You get injured on site without a
yeah.
contract,
I think yeah, it's one of those like super weird gray areas where like they could use the facility, but like the team trainer cannot talk to them or something. Like it's one of those weird like see I see nothing, I know nothing kind of situations and stuff. But we won't get bogged down on that too much. Like I said, I do expect it to get handled sooner than later, but it'll be interesting to see if Belton
it's
is at the
just
front end or if he's like you see the Shook and Sanders contracts happen, and then you see like Belton's in that wave that follows right after. So we'll see. I for
it's
as
just
much as
a
they
interesting situation.
yeah, and like the reason that the article I pulled up is I think it's Huber's one from SI where he's kind of saying like yeah, last year the last second round pick signed early in June and stuff, and we're a little bit behind that timetable this year. But the overall tone of the article is like it's a matter of formality, but you know, would like to see it get completed sooner than later. On the other side of
And
it,
usually
oh yeah,
it's the first round pick that it's usually the first round pick that waits out a little bit longer than the second round. So like I said, it's just an interesting situation that Belton hasn't signed as a second round pick.
yeah. But going to the other side of it in terms of roster moves, so you have most of the draft pick signs. Belton is still in limbo, and the Jair situation finally got closure while we were, while Joe was doing his other pods and stuff. And we made our both of us have made our stance. I'll just say stance because we were kind of in the same field that we didn't understand the need to push him out the door and stuff. And but Packers did. The Packers, there was reports that they tried to renegotiate with him, yada yada. And in the end, they couldn't come to an agreement, so the Packers cut ties and moved on. And you had the sensible fallout where people were picking apart the, like, oh, what did he sign for with Baltimore? Is that what Green Bay offered? Is it not? Were the guarantees different? Honestly, with regards to all of that, my own, people can debate that side of it all they want. My literal only concern is they better hope that their faith in the guys they have is that they'll be as strong coverage players as they believe them to be, and that the changes that, the third year leap for Lucas, the continued improvement, that the additions they made in the draft, and the change in the defensive line coach are going to make the sizable upgrades for the defensive pass defense, or for the pass defense. Because, like I said, Jair was far from a sure thing. There were there was a lot you were gambling on if he was on the roster. But you're supposedly a team with Super Bowl aspirations, and you're cutting top tier talent who I know has been injured a lot, but he's still top tier talent to some regard. So it's like, we'll see. Like, I know that's a really, like, not necessarily the answer people are looking for, but honestly, we'll see is the only thing I've got to say, because nothing and either of us say or do on this pod is going to change what's happened or how it was handled. And we're not going to know what this situation looks like until the Packers take the field in September.
Well, and I know people had drug up my, well, not people per se, but I know Wendell did bring up what I said before and all that, but I I really do still think this is kind of a mistake. I know the Packers are known to be the type that, well, we'd rather do it a year sooner than a year later. And now it's all going to be he said, she said type crap, so you don't know what to believe and all that stuff. But according to Jair's dad, which supposedly they did an interview with, somebody did an interview with him and he talked about it, the Packers lowballed him and basically said something that what Jair signed for in Baltimore, had he been offered that by Green Bay, he would have stayed around. Which I think Baltimore, what was it? It was 1 year, 6 million, and I don't remember how much
I
was
think
like guaranteed.
I think it's like 4 or something, and it can go up to 6 or 7 or something.
Yeah, so that's kind of disheartening in a way. You've already got this guy under contract. You already got this guy. You're already going to have to pay him 17 million no matter what you do, whether you keep him around, whether you get rid of him, whatever. You couldn't at least meet him at that point, because I don't know. I guess I don't have near the faith that the team has and what they've got. Now, I should go back and say I don't think they're bad. I don't think
Yeah.
they're bad at all. I
Yeah.
just don't think there's that all pro star in that secondary or in that corner room. Secondary is a
Right.
different story. You got McKinney, you got Evan Williams that played pretty good when he was healthy last year. Javon Bullard is back for another year. So you've got guys over there. And this is nothing against Nate Hobbs. This is nothing against Carrington Valentine. If you guys remember right, and Mike, you probably remember it, when the Packers drafted him, I was happy as hell they drafted Carrington Valentine. I loved what I saw out of Carrington. This is nothing against them. It's just you're it, what's the saying? You're instead of keeping around solid talent in a weak room, you weakened a weak room.
Yeah,
And because
and
there's
like
no depth there. They didn't replace him with anybody. They didn't draft anybody. They didn't bring in. I mean, yeah, there's some UDFA's in that, but they didn't do anything per se to replace Jair Alexander. You tell Marisol she's had you for a month and a half now. It's my time for an hour.
no, that's Jalen taking a deuce right now and calling for assistance. But no, I totally agree with you, and that's really the basis of our like. I don't. I think disdain is almost too strong of a word, but our our consternation, our relative confusion, because it's
Are
like
worried.
okay, yeah, and like you said, it's not that I think we have scrubs, which I've seen a lot of people say we have. The room's kind of split, and I've seen a lot of peoples who tend to be track hoppers who are now like letting it be known that, oh yeah, I've always been higher on Hobbs and Valentine and Keyshawn. Keyshawn isn't bad as a number one corner. Like we've seen a lot of people who are kind of notorious for being track hoppers say that, and that's all fine and dandy. And you and I have very clear vested interest in the edge in the defensive end room, and I know we both want each other's guy to do well too. But there's not a track record. Rashawn is the guy with the best track record at either. Between the quarterback room and the defensive end pass rush room. Rashawn is the guy with the best track record at his position, and even he's not the same kind of top flight player that Jair was capable of being as recently as the beginning of last season. And like you said, there is the tying into what I said, where this organization has said that they expect, not they want to, they expect to be a contending franchise this year. And they're, I don't want to say they're moving up their timeline, but because of how Jordan looked in 2023, they're like, we are right there. We have what we need to be a competitive team. And to cut one of your, when healthy, and I get that that's a very big caveat, but to cut a guy who, when healthy, is one of the top 5 best players on your roster, and to not have someone who's going to step into that role, and like this is one of those we can roll down the rabbit hole, because we can talk about how they screwed Carrington last year by continuing to try and make Eric Stokes work when it was obvious that Stokes didn't have much left in the tank, but they were still like, we're not going to let Valentine play the majority of snaps during a game. And you don't really go after corners in free agency outside of Hobbs. You don't, I do still think Golden was a necessary thing to do. But then, in the second round, maybe instead of like Belton, who's like a where exactly does he fit player, you go back to like, you need corners kind of thing. And I think our main thing where we mesh is this whole situation in the corner room. It feels like the Packers had, maybe like their 10th toe left in the door, but everything else was out of it on Jair. But they like didn't fully have the table set. I'll liken it to the Rodgers to Love transition, where everyone's like, well, they should have just traded Roger. They should have done the Denver deal after the 2021 season. The Russ Wilson Denver deal, and while yes, maybe they should have. And honestly, I was so fed up with Rodgers after the 2021 playoff game, but maybe they should have. But it's hard to trade a 2-time defending MVP, like, and they had a much better situation with Love waiting in the wings. You don't even have that equivalent in the cornerback room necessarily. And that's where you and I are in agreement that it's like, what exactly is the play here? Like, and like I said, that's where you kind of draw the lines out, that it's like, okay, I know that this defense, our new defensive line coach comes highly touted, and there's a lot of optimism from Halfley, and they're expecting a lot of improvement there. But at the same time, it's like, okay, I do believe Rashawn was bouncing back, or in the process of bouncing back down the end of the season, but and you and I both really believe in Lucas, but at the same time, that's a lot of faith to be putting in coaching change, driving internal development. And like I said, it would be one thing if this was Love's first season. If this was 20 going into 2023, you and I wouldn't be having this much of a conversation. There would be a little poo-pooing about like, oh man, like you wish that you had gotten something for Jair, but at the same time, it's like maybe the situation is just not worth it for a team that's like going through a transition at the quarterback position. You can't really like have that hanging over your young team's head and all that kind of stuff. But when you're supposedly gearing up for a championship run, this is the kind of move that's like, what? Like, what's the plan? Like, yeah, and not to make apples to apples, but there's parts of this that feels like the Wayne Simmons situation in 1997, where and Leroy Butler, I think to his grave, will say that, you know, you could have just stuck it out with Wayne Simmons for like 4 more months. And Leroy, I think to his grave, will state that we would have beaten the Broncos because he's like, our superpower is that Wayne Simmons kicked the shit out of Shannon Sharp, but now Leroy has to cover Shannon Sharp and the trickle down effect from there kind of thing. And I liken it to that where it's like like Leroy always said, you don't have another Wayne Simmons in the parking lot waiting to come in for you, and you don't have that guy. And hey, I would love for both of us to be wrong and have one of Hobbs, Carrington, or Nixon become just play out of their dome and help lead this team to a championship. But for all the hand wringing over Jair, Hobbs is kind of the same guy with less credentials in terms of accomplishments in his career. And like I said, it would be one thing if the pass rush was a year better already, but it's not. And there's a lot of reasons to be excited, but they're just excitement at this point. There's not anything concrete, but it's just one of those, like I said, you hope that it's not a pitfall, that it's just a bump in the road, but it's a little hard to see where the lane lines are taking us at this point.
Well, speaking on what you said about Nate Hobbs is basically like Jair anyway, you look at it, he's had the same injury history. 2022 played 11 games. 2023 played 13 games. 2024 played 11 games and only started 7 of them. So he's got injuries in there. On top of that, the guys that you have on the roster, Carrington's been banged up. Keyshawn's been banged up. So you can't just say, oh, well, we got rid of him because he can't stay healthy. So this is what the current roster looks like with cornerbacks on it. You've got, of course, this is how I view the starting lineup's going to go. You got Nate Hobbs starting on one side. Well, no, I'm going to take that back because this is the situation. Nate Hobbs played primarily slot. Now, they've said that they believe he can be just as good on the outside as he can on the inside. But here's how I think it's going to happen because Keyshawn can't play the slot and Carrington can't play the slot. So you can't have 3 boundary corners. There's only 2 boundaries. So you're going to have to go with, if Carrington's not starting, then you have Hobbs and Nixon on the outside. If Carrington's starting, then you have Carrington and Nixon on the outside with Hobbs in the slot. Then behind them, you got Kalen King, who was a 7th round pick last year, Greg Jr., Micah Robinson, that was a 6th round pick this year, 7th round pick this year, Tyron Herring, Kamal Hayden, who was on the practice squad all last year, Isaiah Dunn, and Jonathan Baldwin. All no names. Nothing, no disrespect to any of those guys. There's no name to them. There's no history to them to say that guy's going to be the next Sam Shields, or that guy's going to be the next Tramon Williams, or that guy's going to be the next. And we'll talk about this just right as soon as I say this. They're supposedly letting Bo Melton play switch positions. I heard Matt LaFleur talk about the Travis Hunter situation down in Jacksonville when kind of speaking on Bo Melton. So it sounds like that there's a possibility he could both be wide receiver and corner for this team. He was doing workouts at corner during mini camps and that. There's no way to think that he's going to become all of a sudden the next Richard Sherman. So right now there's no depth there. You have pieces, but you have no idea what they can and can't do. And it scares the life out of me that we're going to have another Ladarius Gunther chasing Julio Jones across the field.
Yeah,
And so yeah, I
yeah,
know
it's
we've beat this one to death.
yeah. And you just look at the way the season opens. They're gonna find out if they fucked how badly they screwed the pooch with this decision come this season, because you open the season with Detroit, Washington Commanders, Browns, Cowboys. Four teams that, in some regard, want to throw the ball around. I know the Lions want to run and all that kind of stuff, but they have the ability to move, throw the ball around the field. Washington, you have Jaden Daniels, and they just want to wing it around the park. Cleveland, I'm not sure what their offense is going to look like, so you just kind of leave that as an open book. And then Dallas, it's like they have to make good on the Dak contract, so it's like they're going to wing it around. So you're going to find early on whether this decision at corner is worth it, and also to a degree how much the pass rush has improved, as we kind of touched on. So, but yeah, let's talk about Bo at this point. We'll keep it moving here. So, Bo Melton has been on the roster what 3 years now at this point, and
Something like that.
he's definitely in the territory of, all right, they just drafted a bunch of guys who play like similar roles. They signed a guy in Miko Hardman who does similar things to me. I gotta find ways to prove myself more adaptable, more variable, more versatile, so that I can try and stay on this roster. And he's trying a relatively late career move to corner. I know that it's a little murky in terms of how much he's going to play there, if he's going full time. LaFleur's made comments about Travis Hunter. I think at this point in his career, he's got to pick one or the other. I don't think you can really half lane it, playing two sides of the ball at this point.
Really, and in my opinion, though, I don't think so because he's still young enough, and he's got all the athletic traits in the world that you want out of a guy that can do something like that. He's got the speed, he's got the movability, he's got almost everything you would ask for. I know some of the common talking threads on this is that it's more so he can get the upper hand when it comes to special teams, which kind of makes sense in a way. But I really, like you just said, I think it's just him trying to find a way to stay on the roster with everything that they have. Unfortunately, Mecole, I just, unless something happens, I don't know if he sticks around. He's the one guy that I really feel sorry for because if he knew that they were going to load up in a position, I don't think he would have signed here. Especially only on a 1 year deal. I think he would have found a different team to go to where he would have been able to be used more. And then this is before the people come at me, well, special teams. I understand that, but you got guys like Savion Williams, Bo Melton, those type of people who can do the same thing on special teams as Mecole Hardman can do. So, and you can't just, like we've said before, on an NFL roster, you can't justify just having that one guy do nothing but punt and kick returns. You've got to be able to move him in and out of different spots. It's not like it was the 90s where you could just bring in Desmond Howard and he doesn't get any snaps on anything but punt and kick return. You've got to be able to bring him in to play, because if you don't, who are you going to justify him taking their spot?
Yeah. And I know the easy counter to that is the guys that Bisaccia brought and kept along on this roster. And really, though, the only one that was really a bad like case of that was, I've already blocked his name, the safety.
Levitt.
Yeah, Levitt. Other than that, I mean, Nixon has proven. Nixon has basically said like, F special teams at this point. The rules are so dumb at this point and stuff. And
Which I
um,
think is just excuses. And this isn't to bag on Keyshawn. I know we've been, kind of talking against him, but I do like Keyshawn.
yeah,
But if you remember right, when the rules changed, he was excited for him. He
yeah,
was ready for it. And now that it didn't go his way, he's like, I don't want to do it anymore.
yeah. And there and it's not. And I know some people are gonna be like, "Oh, it's because he fumbled." No, it's not because of that. It's I do think he is pretty like annoyed that like the year like instead of teams kicking to them, it's like, oh, they like leveraged everything to like really take returning out of the game kind of thing. And so I do understand. I agree with you. There's definitely a sour grapes because I think as recently as like OTAs, he was kind of like, I can be talked into doing it again. Like, I think,
Yeah.
I think it was just like end of the season, like you said, like just like we were saying, you couldn't take anything Jair said at face value at the end of the season. You couldn't really take anything that Nixon said at face value because he's coming off of honestly, he definitely fumbled, but the Packers definitely got screwed out of the recovery call and that stuff. And it's like you just lost the game pretty, in a pretty crappy fashion where like half the guys got injured and stuff. And then it's like, yeah, screw that. I don't want to do that anymore. But going back to Bo, the funny thing is that I mean the home run case in this scenario is like we just find out that like shit he should have been playing corner his entire life kind of thing like his brother in all honesty. And like there is an element to it where it's kind of like maybe that happens, like you said, he does have the movement skills. He's and the I know it's nowhere near the same, but you see him be a guy where he covers ground really well as a gunner on the punt team, and that's not playing corner or anything like that, but being a receiver who can go track a ball carrier, take good angles, and make a tackle. Hey, that's honestly the harder part to playing corner than everyone's like, oh, you gotta cover. No, that's honestly the easier part. Like you can learn how to game coverages, game route combinations, all that kind of stuff. The If a guy can or wants to tackle, that's the hard part to figure out. And the fact that he's shown like a willingness to do that side of it, I'm like, okay, there might be some legs to it. And on top of it, you've got the athleticism, you have the explosiveness, and he does, for whatever it's worth, he hits the most important threshold he hits for the Packers is he breaks the 7-second three cone threshold for them, which I know a lot of people roll their eyes at the thresholds, but you just look at the guys who don't hit that threshold in Packers history, and there's a lot of guys that you're like, what is he doing out there? He can't move and stuff like that. So I'm not saying any of these things mean like they'll add up and like, oh my God, they have a potential Pro Bowl corner. But it's like the footprints are there that it's like, oh, this is legitimately something we can have conversations about, not like, oh my God, he's so desperate, he knows the end is near kind of thing. Like there's an element to it, and we both kind of joked about it, but also like there's enough there that's on film from his gunner to his athleticism to just the willingness to do it that you're like maybe there's something there. And there's a reason for optimism for both Melton and the team. But
And I
um,
think somebody actually took his combine results and plugged them in to the calculator, and he actually tested out better as a corner than he did a wide receiver.
especially because his size isn't as bad because he's 5'11", 190-ish, and that's solid for a corner. And it is just funny how like you're not playing the same position but you're playing on the same part of the field, and it's such a like, oh my God, his size is such a negative at receiver, but at corner it's like, oh, he's like well sized for the position kind of thing and stuff. But
And you would think, honestly, that he'd be able to read the quarterback a little bit better with his ability, his processes with being a wide receiver and knowing how to play the ball. His ball skills should be out of this world. So it's going to be an interesting concept, and I have a feeling it is the last ditch effort to find his right spot on here, but because I don't think he doesn't have any more practice squad eligibility left, does
No,
he?
he's done. Yeah. So, but the part of it there is that I think he has a better chance of making it as a corner than he does as a wide receiver. You know, you
Unless is there a loophole? Is there a loophole that if he changes positions, they can get 3 more years out of the practice
I
squad?
don't think so. I think it's attached to the name, not the position.
So, but no, and not that it's a bad thing, because look how long we've been wanting, you know, all the talent at wide receiver. But I do feel bad for, like I said, Bo Melton and my guy Malik Heath, and those kind of guys, because they're great players. Well, they're solid players. They just aren't going to get used because of the fact of now we've got first round wide receiver Matthew Golden, we've got third round wide receiver Savion Williams, we signed Mecole Hardman. You know, we're and of course, the big thing is when is Christian Watson going to be back? And of course, him and Dobbs are on the last years of the contract. So do they re-sign them? Do they let them both go? Do they only sign one? Do they not sign the other? Mike's celebrating because of some sporting event over there. So,
Padres, go Padres!
oh, I'm out of baseball right now. My Braves are on this fucking shit list. So, but
Honestly, if it wasn't for Marisol's Padres, I would be too, because I again have continued to boycott my Red Sox until further notice, because John Henry's become a little, honestly, a wuss about everything about ownership when he's basically printing money. But that's neither here nor there on this podcast. But um,
yeah, I mean, it's going to be an interesting battle this summer.
yep.
So I look forward to seeing it, and this is my spot where I'm going to break in. I will be up in Green Bay August 18th through the 26th. So if you see me around, don't hit me. You can hug me, you can shake my hand, but just don't hit me. I'm getting too old for that shit.
If you work as a manufacturing facilities engineer, installing a new piece of equipment can be as complex as the machinery itself. From prep work to alignment and testing, it's your team's job to put it all together. That's why it's good to have Grainger on your side. With industrial-grade products and next-day delivery, Grainger helps ensure you have everything you need close at hand through every step of the installation. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
You set the gold standard for your business. Your website should do the same. Wix puts you at the helm, so you can enjoy the creative freedom of designing your site just the way you want. Want someone to bounce your ideas off? Talk with AI to create a beautiful site together. Whatever your business, manage it from one place and tie it all together with a personalized domain name. Gear up for success with a brand that says you best. You can do it yourself on Wix.
But other than those, like, I know we've hit those big topics, but I mean, I know another one that we've touched on. It's not new news, but like we've been touching on the Demarcus Covington addition as the new defensive line and run game coordinator for the defensive staff seems to be getting a lot of appraise both from the players and the rest of the staff. Um, you know, not too much you can gain out of that from OTAs and this. Not even, like we're not even in preseason, but we'll see where that goes. Covington comes with a really good track record in terms of success with the Patriots, and the Patriots haven't necessarily had like top end talent when it comes to like draft capital spent at the position kind of thing. He has made a lot of do with like day two kind of pick guys and stuff. So we'll see where that stacks, but you really do hope that it, like I said, there's a lot of reasons for optimism with how this offseason has gone, but also, like I said, the reason that you and I are not jumping up and down about the things that seem to be playing out well is the Jair situation combined with the fact that, okay, what is good enough in a year that you're expecting to be Super Bowl contenders? And that's really the barometer for what this Packers team is measuring itself against. Like I said, the Jair situation, if it played out this way before the 2023 season, we would have, like I said, we would have kind of complained that you could have at least gotten a day 3 pick for him, kind of thing. But
And I
otherwise,
think we still would have had some of the same arguments, though, that
yeah, help the
if they
rookie,
even
yeah,
yeah, even if they would have not even if they would have done it in 2023 going into the 2024 season, if they still would have followed through with the way they did things and not bring in, draft a guy in the second round or draft a guy in the first round or whatever it is, and they just stayed pat and the only thing they did was sign Nate Hobbs or, whatever it
equivalent,
is.
yeah,
Yeah, so it just that would I think I would still question it at that point. And I think that's the only reason why I question it now is there's no real corresponding move to it. And to all those that they need to bring Razul back. I'm sorry, Razul's 30 what,
he's cooked.
31?
Like I
Yeah,
love
he
Rasul.
didn't look good last year.
He can't move anymore, and like the best case is like, oh, he's there to mentor the younger players, and maybe you could play him at safety, but you already got too many safeties on this roster. There's all this talk about like, oh my god, is Javon Bullard in trouble? Blah. He's not. They're gonna find a role for him and stuff. And Williams wasn't healthy
There's
all
no
season.
way.
Yeah, like
There's no way.
they do not give up on second round picks anywhere near that quickly. So like, get that out of your head. And then the other side of it is like, just, and then you see other names like Asante Samuel Jr. thrown around. He's been, kind of like you brought up with the Hobbs. He's been even more as injured as Jair has been the past, basically the past time frame of their contract of Asante's career and Jair's like final year of his rookie contract going into his updated contract. Like he's the same type of injured player. So
Well, I think the one he's going through now is a neck injury, isn't it?
yeah, even more so.
So if he was such this hot commodity, why isn't he signed already?
Yeah.
As far as I know, he's still a free agent. And if he was this hot commodity, then there would be no wishing he would be on the team because he'd already be signed somewhere.
Yep.
So that just
Exactly.
tells me that there's nothing there. So unless they can find a guy like they did Razul, where it's just they take a chance on somebody and that somebody plays out of their mind, then we're stuck with what we got.
Yep. But at this point, anything else you wanted to discuss in regards to where the off season's going, what's been going on, or kind of put
I
a bow on
think
this episode?
unless you want to talk about Rodgers ending up in Pittsburgh a little bit.
I mean, I guess we're almost like, there's no contract, but we're almost obligated to talk about it. Like,
I mean, I hope the best for him in a way. I know he's not been anybody's favorite person for a while because of the stuff that he talks about, but he does still have love for Green Bay and that. So I got to
yeah,
give him credit for that. So I
the
got to
things he
give,
did for Jordan, yeah, like he made it crappy for Jordan, but Jordan himself says like he did a lot of good things for me while I was here. He did try to have a solid relationship, and we still text and stuff. So you do have to, like you said, you do have to commend him for that, because I do appreciate that, as weird and as it really insane as he got at the end. He did make sure that he didn't do exactly the same thing Brett did to him as a rookie to Jordan. So, and then the other side of it is, yeah, and the the other side of it for me, the outside of Packers here for me, is my dad and my brother are Steelers fans, and for them, I kind of like lament. I have no idea what the Steelers are doing at this point. Like, I don't understand what what their franchise direction is. I don't know if they're just like, we're just so tied to Tomlin at this point, it's hard to move on, kind of thing and stuff. But who I think would get hired immediately if he got fired by Pittsburgh. But at the same time, that one does feel like almost an Andy Reid in Philadelphia situation where it's kind of run
It
its
gets
course.
stale.
Yeah, it does. And like, uh, make all the jokes you want. The whole no losing records thing, it is impressive, especially when you consider like he hasn't had a quarterback the last 3 years. But at the same time, it's like I don't understand what they're trying to do here. Like, eh, yeah, yeah. So, like you said,
And I got to give him credit. I think Will Howard is a solid quarterback that if he can get a little bit of time to sit and learn, and that he might be able to be a starter. But and then they have DK, but they kind of did to Pittsburgh fans what Goody did to Packers fans last year, where we had that glimmer of hope for like a half hour that we were going to have Aaron Jones and Josh Jacobs on the same team. And Pittsburgh did the same thing, thinking that they were going to have DK Metcalf and George Pickens on the same team. And then they got rid of Pickens. So, I really, I don't follow the Steelers way too much, so I'm not sure what their whole wide receiver room is made up of. So I don't know what kind of weapons Rodgers going to have to throw to. But if they don't get their offensive line fixed, Rodgers isn't going to do any better in Pittsburgh than he did in New York.
yeah, it is
So
a better situation than what New York had, but they also like got injured a bunch, kind of thing. So it's yeah. Uh, as much as I'm like, I very much got very tired with all the Rogers stuff at the end. I didn't want to see him go off sad potatoes like he did when he blew his Achilles on the first quarter of his time as a Jet. And you just really hope. I'm just at the point where I'm like, you just really don't want him to go out there and you realize like 2 weeks in, like oh man, like he can't play anymore, kind of thing. And like,
but the thing is he's still got the arm talent. You can see him
yeah,
throwing, and he's still got the talent, and he's still got the mind for the game. You just don't know what's going on there that's not allowing him to be what he was. Is the body really failing that much that the arms there, the mind's there, but the rest of the body just can't keep up? Or is it, I hate to be that guy, but is it maybe some of the off the field shit that is dragging him down?
ayahuasca
Too
hasn't
many
given him
shrooms,
new legs at this point.
something like that, or those darkness retreats, or you know, being immunized and not being vaccinated, or however you want. I guess he is married now,
Yeah,
so congrats to
that
him.
we'll close on Bakhtiari, like kind of setting him ablaze for that one. I know it was all in jest, but it was hilarious that Bakhtiari had the post like, I got invited to one Packers quarterback wedding this offseason. That was a lot of fun to see and stuff.
Well, it
And I
makes
know
you
he was
wonder if it was one of those weird ones where they were in like Jamaica and jumped a broom
oh,
and
absolutely. This was no U.S. courthouse marriage that like, oh, there was no need for witnesses. There were no witnesses because there were no witnesses. There was no
right,
room
there
for
was no
witnesses.
crowd, there was no nothing. It was just they were randomly in this one weird, not weird, but this one offshoot country on vacation, and they walked around a table, and all of a sudden now they're married, and now they
Yeah,
got to be like, all right, well, it's legal.
and that's the unfortunate thing is Rogers long past the line where it's like 5 years ago, even probably this would be a like, oh, that's nice. He had his nice, private moment, quiet kind of thing. It's like now it's like the weird gets attached in numerous settings and numerous
Was
degrees.
it that they were in a darkness retreat, and whoever's hand you grabbed first was like you're the person you were marrying or something?
But like I said, I do on some level wish him the best, and yeah, I just don't want to see it where it's like, oh, he should have just retired. What's it called? Paul. Oh shucks. What's it called? Matub and Paul Noonan, on their pod, one of Noonan's jokes is that he goes, "If we know anything about Rogers, he does like to make money. So you
Yeah.
got to have money to go on darkness retreats." So it's sad to say that maybe it is almost forced in a sense because it's like what's my, he does not making State Farm commercials and stuff like that anymore, and all. So,
No.
But yeah,
But yeah, I mean, congrats on him, and Jordan got married too, so congrats to him and that, and more power to him. It was really random to find out that Aaron got married because it was just in a fucking, what was it? It was after a practice, and it was like a little press conference deal where they were asking questions, and he just kind of blurted out, "Well, I did get married and shit like that." It's like, what?
yeah,
But before we completely close out, and since we're kind of just trashing Rogers for some of his decisions, I do want to say that we probably will still be doing the off-season, off-topic stuff for a little bit longer, probably until maybe training camp, maybe around when the first preseason happens, or preseason game happens. So if you guys want any, you have any guests that you want on here, just let us know. And we will be doing a schedule thing where we're going to do our predictions for games, probably like we did last year. Sometime during training camp we'll do that way we can get those on record. So we are going to be doing Packer stuff. We aren't switching the format of this. I'm just trying to do something that way we have content flowing out, not just dead air for 4 months or whatever. And yeah, so
you forget what we
don't be
sound like.
disheartened. Yeah, don't be disheartened. We are a Packers podcast. I'm just trying to get you guys something to listen to other than the same 3 talking points over and over again.
This is Joe pulling out his Paul Rudd close-up magic from Ant-Man and the Wasp. So, but well, like Joe said, we'll put a bow on it. Thank you for joining us today as we recapped where the Packers offseason has been to this point. Check back with us in 6-ish weeks, basically, when training camp starts. Not when it starts, but when we're in the thick of training camp, because media availability is going to be light. There's not going to be too much true like practice reps and all that kind of stuff. So we'll kind of really pick it up as the team gets into preseason prep and all that kind of stuff. But until next time, that's Iowa Joe. I'm Mike. Go Pack Go, and aloha.